My name is Howard Elliott. I'm 42 years old, and for the past 15 years I've been the operations manager of Elliott Manufacturing, the family business my father painstakingly built from the ground up. Over that decade and a half, I earned a reputation not just for steady leadership, but for my insistence on rigorous documentation and process discipline. Every contract signed, every operational change implemented, and every financial report filed was backed by detailed records. I believed, and still believe, that professionalism and precision build trust, especially in family-run enterprises where emotions can cloud judgment. That's why the day of my father's will reading was such a pivotal moment for me, both personally and professionally. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension. My sister Lisa Caldwell, who's 3 years younger than me, sat across the polished oak table, wearing a smirk so palpable it could almost be measured. Without hesitating, she declared, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm getting the house and the company. He can have the tools." The words hung in the air, cocky and dismissive. A few chuckles rippled through the room, some out of disbelief, some from nerves. I caught the eyes of a few relatives, noticing their uncertain glances. Lisa's attitude wasn't just immature, it was dangerously uninformed. She acted like she was entitled to the entire estate, as if she had already won before the legalities had been addressed. But I had spent the last 15 years learning the intricacies of our company's ownership structure and my father's estate planning. I wasn't about to let her assumptions go unchallenged or unexamined. Then Jacob Freeman, the estate lawyer, cleared his throat, shifting the room's attention sharply. He spoke with measured authority. "Actually, the business was never in your father's personal name. It's held within a family trust established years ago." That statement landed like a bombshell. The room fell silent, the previous laughter fading instantly. I nodded calmly, the gears turning in my mind, already plotting my next moves. I understood immediately what Jacob's revelation meant. The business wasn't a simple asset to be handed down by will. Its ownership was enshrined within a trust, with specific beneficiaries and clear fiduciary responsibilities. That changed the entire playing field. This wasn't just about who had the loudest voice in the room or the biggest smile. It was about legal frameworks, contractual obligations, and documented evidence, areas where I had a clear advantage. Inside, I was calculating. My father's trust documents, shareholder agreements, and operational records were my arsenal. I knew exactly where the leverage points were, and I was ready to use them. Lisa's casual dismissal of my stake in the company and the whole estate was naive, at best. She didn't realize how much I had prepared for this moment, how meticulously I'd preserved every relevant document. As Jacob continued explaining the trust's terms and the legal ramifications, I maintained a composed exterior. There was no need for confrontation then. It was too early. Instead, I committed every detail to memory, ensuring I'd have all the facts straight when it came time to assert my rightful ownership. The room's energy shifted subtly. I sensed that my sister's overconfidence was beginning to crack under the weight of legal reality. From that moment, I resolved to approach this with the same professionalism and strategic calm I'd applied to running the business. This was not about family drama or emotional reactions. It was about methodical, documented truth prevailing over entitlement and misinformation. I acknowledged Jacob with a simple, "Understood," signaling my readiness to engage with the process fully informed and prepared. The stakes were high. The house, the business, and my father's legacy were on the line, but I was confident my years of experience managing operations, coupled with my deep understanding of the legal structures my father put in place, would guide me through the complexities ahead. The will reading was just the first battle in a longer, more intricate campaign to secure what was rightfully mine, not just for me, but for the future of Elliott Manufacturing. As I sat there, the weight of responsibilities settling on my shoulders, I couldn't help but think this was not just about inheritance. It was about preserving the integrity of a business, honoring my father's careful planning, and proving that steady, professional diligence beats impulsive arrogance every time. The game had just begun, and I was ready to play it with precision. For the past 15 years, I have been at the helm of Elliott Manufacturing's operations, a role that demanded more than just overseeing daily production. When I first stepped into the position of operations director, the company was generating approximately $3.2 million in annual revenue. Through a combination of strategic planning, process optimization, and targeted expansions, I successfully guided the firm to nearly triple its earnings, reaching $8.5 million per year. This growth was not accidental. It was the result of carefully executed initiatives, including 2 major facility expansions that I personally managed. The first expansion, early in my tenure, involved the acquisition and integration of new automated machinery, which significantly increased our throughput capacity while maintaining quality standards. This project required meticulous coordination across multiple departments: procurement, engineering, finance, and compliance, and involved negotiating contracts with several vendors. Every step was documented extensively, from initial proposals to final installation reports, ensuring transparency and traceability. I regularly presented these updates to the board, substantiating the business case with detailed financial forecasts and risk assessments. The second expansion, occurring about 5 years later, was a physical enlargement of the production plant, adding 40% more floor space and creating room for a new product line. Again, I was responsible for coordinating legal reviews, zoning approvals, and budgeting compliance. Throughout, I maintained comprehensive records, meeting minutes, expense reports, and correspondence with contractors and regulatory bodies. These documents would later prove critical in illustrating the company's operational soundness and my stewardship. In addition to these expansions, my role encompassed the oversight of daily operations, supply chain management, and quality assurance. Perhaps equally important was my involvement in corporate governance. I held vested stock options tied directly to the family trust that owned the business, and I controlled a 40% equity stake in the holding company responsible for Elliott Manufacturing's assets. This arrangement was formalized through shareholder agreements and trust documents that I had studied thoroughly over the years. My familiarity with these legal frameworks was not merely academic. It allowed me to advocate effectively for the company's best interests and to ensure compliance with fiduciary responsibilities. My record-keeping practices have always been rigorous. I maintained an organized archive of financial statements, operational manuals, and contractual agreements, over 800 pages worth of documentation. These records were digitized, securely backed up, and regularly reviewed for accuracy. I also kept detailed logs of board meetings and shareholder communications, which tracked decisions and authorized actions. These archives not only supported internal accountability, but also served as evidence of the company's governance in any external scrutiny. Beyond the paperwork, I cultivated strong relationships with our key clients and suppliers. Trust in business is often intangible but essential, and I made it a priority to foster open communication channels and consistent service delivery. These relationships fortified the company's market position and created goodwill that would be indispensable in navigating any disputes. Despite all this, Lisa's attitude demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of the company's structure and my professional leverage. She treated the business as a personal possession, disregarding the intricate legal ownership and the operational role I played. Her ignorance of the trust and shareholder agreements was glaring. She had no access to internal documents, no legal counsel, and no comprehension of the fiduciary framework protecting our assets. Her underestimation was a critical oversight. While she saw inheritance as a straightforward, immediate transfer of assets, I understood it as a complex, legally governed process that required evidence, documentation, and adherence to established corporate governance. My 15 years of managing Elliott Manufacturing were not just about running a business. They were about navigating and upholding a carefully constructed legal and operational system. That system was designed to protect the company's continuity and its beneficiaries, including myself. As I reflected on this disparity, it became clear that my professional background and methodical stewardship had positioned me well for the battles ahead. I wasn't simply an heir by blood. I was a key stakeholder with documented responsibilities and a proven track record of delivering value. This was not a matter of family sentiment, but of concrete professional authority, grounded in thorough documentation and legal clarity. In that moment, I resolved to leverage this expertise fully. The years I had invested in growing and safeguarding Elliott Manufacturing had fortified my standing far beyond simple ownership claims. I was prepared to demonstrate that my role and my rights were legally enforceable, and that any challenge, particularly from someone uninformed like Lisa, would meet with systematic, well-documented resistance. The groundwork for my strategy was already in place, resting on the solid foundation of my professional experience and meticulous record-keeping. Lisa Caldwell is my younger sister by 3 years. At 39, she had long struggled with financial instability, largely due to a pattern of impulsive spending and a mounting debt load that topped $118,000 by the time Dad passed. I was well aware she was under significant pressure to resolve her liabilities quickly. This created a motivation that clouded her judgment and pushed her to view the inheritance as a shortcut to financial relief. From the outset, Lisa made her intentions clear during the will reading, assertively claiming both the family house and the business. She appeared convinced that, since Dad's name was on the house deed, it was hers by default, and that the business itself was a straightforward personal asset of his estate. But this assumption was deeply flawed. What she did not understand, or chose to ignore, were the complex legal structures my father had put in place to protect the family assets from exactly this kind of reckless entitlement. Elliott Manufacturing was never owned outright by Dad. Instead, it was held within a carefully crafted family trust, one established years ago with the guidance of legal and financial advisors. The trust was irrevocable, meaning its terms could not be altered after Dad's death, and it designated specific beneficiaries, including me, as the primary steward of the business. The trust arrangement was designed to ensure continuity of management and protect the business from external claims or mismanagement. Lisa had no legal standing as a direct owner or trustee. Simply put, the company was shielded from her grasp. Regarding the house, the situation was similarly complex. Though the deed bore Dad's name, ownership was shared via a tenancy agreement that included a right of first refusal clause. This clause stipulated that, in the event of a beneficiary's death, the property's other owners or trust beneficiaries had priority to purchase the deceased's share before any third party could intervene. This contractual safeguard was intended to prevent the home from defaulting to a single heir or being liquidated without family consensus. Lisa's claim ignored these binding legal provisions. Worse still, Lisa lacked any legal representation or access to the internal documents that would have clarified these facts. She had not engaged an attorney to review estate or trust documents, nor had she requested the shareholder agreements or trust instruments detailing asset ownership. This lack of counsel left her dangerously uninformed and vulnerable to miscalculations during the inheritance dispute. I was also aware of her attempts prior to Dad's passing to pressure him into transferring assets prematurely. Reviewing email correspondence and text messages revealed several instances where she pressed Dad for early inheritance or property transfers, possibly motivated by desperation to settle her debts. These communications, which I had preserved, painted a picture of entitlement mixed with financial desperation. This kind of behavior not only violated the trust my father had placed in the estate's structured plan, but also demonstrated her disregard for legal and fiduciary boundaries. Lisa's critical oversight was thus twofold. First, a fundamental misunderstanding of the legal and corporate ownership frameworks guarding the family assets. Second, an absence of professional guidance that left her exposed to the reality of the trust and tenancy clauses. Her assumption that the estate would simply fall into her lap was naive and legally untenable. This gap in her knowledge and preparedness gave me an immediate strategic advantage. While she operated under flawed assumptions and emotional urgency, I relied on years of operational control, deep familiarity with the trust's legal architecture, and a vast archive of supporting documentation. My position was not just one of blood relationship, but of documented authority and fiduciary responsibility. In essence, Lisa's pressure to claim the house and business quickly was driven by personal financial distress and a misinformed interpretation of inheritance rights. Her eagerness to assert control without understanding the binding legal structures exposed her to professional and legal censure. She was, unknowingly, walking into a carefully laid web of corporate governance and estate planning protections built explicitly to prevent such impulsive claims. As I reflected on her position, I recognized that this was more than a sibling rivalry. It was a clash between professional stewardship and reckless entitlement. My task was clear: to uphold the legal structures my father had entrusted me with, protect the company and family home, and manage the estate dispute with methodical precision. Lisa's lack of legal counsel and ignorance of the trust's terms were weaknesses I intended to leverage fully. The battle lines were drawn not in personal insults, but in legal statutes, contracts, and documented evidence, areas where I maintained clear superiority. After the will reading, I immediately immersed myself in a comprehensive review of all pertinent estate documents, starting with my father's last will and testament, the family trust's legal instruments, and the corporate filings related to Elliott Manufacturing. I methodically studied each page, cross-referencing clauses and provisions, knowing that these documents contained the keys to dismantling my sister's misguided claims. One of the first things that struck me was the irrevocable nature of the family trust. Unlike a revocable trust that can be modified or dissolved during the grantor's lifetime, this trust was deliberately structured to be permanent, binding all assets within it under predetermined terms. This meant that the business ownership wasn't simply an asset to be divided at will. It was governed by legal stipulations that protected it from external claims, including those from heirs who were not beneficiaries or trustees. My father had ensured that control passed in a way that safeguarded the company's continuity and integrity. Next, I focused on the shareholder rights and buy-sell agreements embedded within the trust and corporate governance documents. These agreements clearly defined how ownership interests could be transferred, particularly upon the death of a beneficiary. Crucially, they included clauses that triggered buyout options and rights of first refusal for remaining shareholders and trust beneficiaries. This framework served as a bulwark against any attempt to forcibly seize assets or alter ownership outside of agreed-upon conditions. The house deed required equally careful scrutiny. Although it bore my father's name, I uncovered that the property was held as part of a tenancy agreement involving multiple beneficiaries, including the trust. This agreement explicitly mandated that any co-owner wishing to sell their interest first offer it to the other owners or the trust before engaging third parties. This right of first refusal was not a mere formality. It was a legal safeguard ensuring that the house could not be transferred or claimed unilaterally, effectively protecting family interests and preventing external acquisition. In parallel, I reviewed an extensive cache of email correspondence and text messages between Lisa and Dad. These communications, which I had collected over time for operational transparency, revealed a pattern of pressure from Lisa, attempting to expedite asset transfers in the months leading up to Dad's passing. She repeatedly requested early inheritance and access to business resources, often in ways that skirted formal processes and legal boundaries. While emotionally charged, these messages were cold evidence of her intent to circumvent the structured estate plan. So importantly, Lisa's failure to secure legal representation or request access to internal documents became glaringly apparent. She operated without counsel, unaware of the legal protections embedded within the trust and shareholder agreements. This lack of professional guidance left her strategically exposed, unable to anticipate the binding nature of the documents governing asset distribution. As I integrated these findings, I mapped out the critical leverage points. The irrevocable trust immunized the business from direct probate claims. The shareholder agreements and buy-sell clauses regulated ownership transfers with enforceable legal mechanisms. The house's right of first refusal empowered beneficiaries to block unsolicited sales or claims. Lisa's planned approach ignored all these factors, relying solely on superficial assumptions about ownership based on name recognition and outdated notions of inheritance. I documented every detail meticulously, preparing cross-referenced summaries and timelines that correlated Lisa's actions with legal stipulations. This objective analytical approach removed emotion from the equation and underscored that the dispute was fundamentally about adhering to established legal frameworks rather than yielding to entitlement. In short, the documents revealed that my sister's aggressive posture was not only unfounded but also in direct violation of the trust's conditions and contractual agreements. The business and house were locked within legal structures designed to prevent precisely this kind of reckless claim. Her ignorance of these frameworks would prove to be a significant strategic disadvantage. Understanding the full scope of these protections, I felt a renewed confidence in our position. The estate was not a free-for-all. It was a carefully managed system that prioritized continuity, fiduciary responsibility, and documented legal rights. My role as the primary beneficiary and operations director placed me in a position of authority to enforce these provisions. As the initial shock from the will reading subsided, I was already mentally assembling the next phase of my strategy, leveraging these legal protections, backed by clear, comprehensive documentation, to counter Lisa's claims effectively. This was not a matter of sentiment or familial dispute. It was a professional legal contest rooted in irrevocable contracts and well-established corporate governance. The clarity and strength of these documents provided a roadmap. I would engage legal counsel, marshal evidence, and methodically assert my rights. The stakes were substantial, but the foundation was solid. The trust's irrevocable nature, combined with shareholder agreements and property clauses, formed an unyielding barrier against my sister's uninformed assumptions. The path ahead was clear. I would defend the estate and business with the full weight of legal precision and documented authority. After thoroughly reviewing the legal landscape surrounding the estate, I knew it was essential to bring in expert counsel to ensure the strategy I devised would be watertight. I immediately contacted Jacob Freeman, the estate lawyer, who had originally overseen my father's trust setup and had decades of experience in complex inheritance and corporate governance cases. Jacob's reputation for precision and his ability to dissect intricate documents made him the ideal partner to translate these technical clauses into actionable legal steps. The first step Jacob and I took was a comprehensive audit of every relevant document in the estate's portfolio. I provided him with an exhaustive compilation of materials I had meticulously gathered and maintained over the years. 15 years of operational reports detailing production metrics, financial performance, and project evaluations, trust and shareholder agreements specifying ownership rights and fiduciary duties, minutes from shareholder meetings where key decisions were made, and detailed financial statements encompassing budgeting, audits, and tax filings. This collection totaled over 800 pages, all organized chronologically and categorized by relevance. Jacob's review process was methodical and systematic. He cross-referenced the trust's irrevocable clauses with state trust laws, ensuring there were no loopholes that could compromise the business's protected status. He analyzed the buy-sell agreements embedded within shareholder contracts, highlighting the mandatory procedures triggered by my father's passing. These included right of first refusal clauses on the family home and mandatory buyout options for shares, which prevented unilateral asset transfers without approval from the trust beneficiaries. Together, we constructed a legal framework that unambiguously positioned the family trust, and by extension myself as its primary beneficiary and appointed operations director, as the sole legal owner and manager of Elliott Manufacturing. Jacob emphasized that Lisa's claims lacked any statutory or contractual basis, particularly since she was neither a trustee nor a designated beneficiary under the trust agreement. To bolster our position, I gathered affidavits from several key executives and department heads who had worked closely with me over the years. Each affidavit detailed my ongoing operational control, my role in strategic decision-making, and the seamless continuity of management under my leadership. These testimonies were intended to demonstrate to any adjudicating authority that the business's operational integrity was intact and that any attempt to disrupt this through unsupported claims would be not only legally untenable, but harmful to stakeholders. Meanwhile, I organized a digital repository with all pertinent communications, including emails and correspondence that documented Lisa's prior attempts to influence my father regarding asset transfers. These communications revealed a pattern of pressure and urgency on her part that disregarded legal process. Jacob advised that this evidence could be pivotal in showing motive and intent, framing her claims as opportunistic rather than legitimate. Recognizing Lisa's lack of legal representation and unfamiliarity with the trust and shareholder agreements, I understood that she was unlikely to contest these points effectively. This awareness shaped my internal strategy. Rather than engage in emotional confrontation, I would rely on the objective weight of documents and legal precedent. She doesn't realize that the trust governs all assets, and the house buyout clause protects our interests, I reminded myself, focusing on the legal architecture rather than family dynamics. Jacob and I also devised a communication protocol to maintain professionalism. All future discussions with Lisa and her representatives would be routed through formal legal channels, reducing risks of misstatements or informal concessions. This approach was designed to keep the dispute within controlled parameters and to document every interaction meticulously. By the end of this phase, we had mapped out a multi-step legal strategy: serve formal notices disputing Lisa's claims, file petitions to enforce trust terms and shareholder agreements, prepare for potential court actions to obtain injunctions against unauthorized asset transfers, and, if necessary, pursue recovery of damages and legal fees. Each step was backed by comprehensive documentation and legal rationale, ensuring that our position would be robust under scrutiny. Throughout this process, I remained focused on the long term, protecting the business, preserving my father's legacy, and maintaining operational stability. The depth of documentation I had accumulated was not just a record of past successes, it was now the foundation of a strategic defense. With Jacob's expertise and my detailed evidence, I was confident that we could systematically dismantle Lisa's uninformed claims and uphold the legal and ethical stewardship my father had entrusted to me. This stage of planning was critical. It transformed what could have been a chaotic family dispute into a structured professional contest governed by law and documentation. No matter how loudly entitlement might be claimed, the facts and contracts would speak louder. The meticulous preparation I had invested in over the years was beginning to pay dividends, and I was ready to activate this strategy fully. Jacob Freeman's confirmation of the multiple breaches underpinning Lisa's claims was a pivotal moment in our legal strategy. After his exhaustive review of the estate documents, corporate filings, and correspondence, he outlined several critical violations that fundamentally undermined her position. First and foremost, Lisa had attempted what could only be described as an usurpation of trust assets. Specifically, she sought control over Elliott Manufacturing, which, as Jacob emphasized, was never held in my father's personal name, but rather owned outright by the irrevocable family trust. This distinction was crucial. The trust's legal framework expressly forbade any unilateral transfer of ownership rights without trustee approval and compliance with its stringent terms. Jacob detailed how Lisa's assertions flagrantly ignored the binding buy-sell agreements embedded within the trust and corporate governance documents. These agreements were designed to regulate ownership transfers, especially in the event of a beneficiary's death. The buy-sell clauses stipulated a mandatory process for any shareholder wishing to relinquish or acquire interest, including rights of first refusal by current shareholders and the trust itself. Lisa's efforts to claim the business and the house circumvented this process entirely, constituting a direct breach of contract. Jacob stressed that such violations could trigger legal remedies, including injunctions and damages for breach of fiduciary duty. Importantly, Jacob pointed out Lisa's disregard for fiduciary responsibilities. Though she was an heir by blood, she held no fiduciary role within the trust or the corporate entity. Her attempts to interfere with operations and assert ownership were not only legally baseless, but also exposed her to potential claims of bad faith and breach of trust. In practical terms, this meant that her actions could be challenged not just as improper claims, but as violations subject to regulatory scrutiny and sanctions. To assemble a watertight case, Jacob and I compiled a comprehensive dossier documenting the legal and factual basis for our position. This included the original trust agreement, annotated with relevant clauses governing asset control and beneficiary rights, shareholder agreements outlining the corporate governance protocols, and the buy-sell agreements stipulating mandatory procedures for ownership changes. Each document was cross-referenced to demonstrate the interconnected legal safeguards protecting the business and property assets. In parallel, we included detailed financial statements and operational reports that I had maintained over the years. These documents established a clear trail of continuous management and oversight, reinforcing that ownership and control were exercised in accordance with the trust's terms. We also incorporated minutes from shareholder meetings where governance decisions had been ratified, further substantiating the legitimacy of the trust's current administration under my stewardship. An especially compelling element of our dossier was a series of email exchanges and written communications from Lisa, attempting to interfere with ongoing contracts and seize company property. Jacob advised that these messages were critical evidence of her disregard for the legal framework and her intention to disrupt established corporate operations. We categorized and time-stamped these communications meticulously, ready to present them as evidence of bad faith conduct. Building on this documentation, Jacob drafted formal legal notices to be served to Lisa. These notices unequivocally stated that she lacked any ownership rights to the business or the house under the trust's terms and corporate agreements. They warned of immediate legal consequences should she persist in unauthorized interference or asset seizure attempts. Additionally, we prepared regulatory filings to notify relevant authorities of the breach of fiduciary and corporate governance standards, thereby laying groundwork for potential administrative actions against her. Throughout this process, I remained disciplined in maintaining a professional demeanor and adhering to formal communication protocols. Jacob insisted that all interactions with Lisa be conducted through legal channels to ensure a clear, documented record and prevent any informal agreements or misunderstandings. This approach was essential to uphold the integrity of our position and to avoid giving Lisa opportunities to exploit casual conversations or correspondence. Recognizing Lisa's lack of legal counsel, we anticipated that these formal measures would exert significant pressure on her. Our strategy was to leverage the weight of legal documentation and regulatory oversight to isolate her claims as untenable and to protect the business and estate assets from unauthorized claims or disruption. In preparing for potential court proceedings, Jacob and I also outlined contingency plans for injunctions to prevent any attempted transfer or interference with assets. We anticipated that if Lisa ignored the formal notices, we could swiftly seek court enforcement to uphold the trust's provisions and the buy-sell agreements. This proactive stance was crucial to deter further unauthorized actions and to safeguard continuity of management. As I reviewed the compiled evidence and legal drafts, I felt assured that our case was not just legally sound, but strategically robust. The combination of detailed documentation, legal authority, and procedural discipline positioned us to systematically dismantle Lisa's unfounded claims. This wasn't about family conflict. It was about upholding the rule of law and protecting a business built over decades through careful planning and stewardship. Jacob's confirmation of every infraction, coupled with our methodical preparation, marked a clear turning point. The professional and legal framework was in place to counteract entitlement with documented rights, to replace confusion with clarity, and to enforce fiduciary and contractual obligations without exception. The groundwork was laid for the next steps, serving formal notices, initiating regulatory filings, and preparing for any necessary court actions to protect the integrity of the trust and the business assets. In sum, our strategy now rested on a foundation of unassailable legal documentation and a firm commitment to procedural rigor. The trust's irrevocable nature and the shareholder agreements created a formidable barrier to unauthorized claims, and we had the documentation and legal expertise to enforce it. As we moved forward, the professional approach we adopted would ensure that entitlement and ignorance of law would not prevail. The next phase was clear: activate our legal defenses and prepare for any challenges while maintaining disciplined, systematic control of the unfolding situation. Once Jacob and I finalized the legal strategy, the next critical step was to make our position unmistakably clear to Lisa. We drafted a series of formal notices, letters meticulously worded to lay out the legal facts, citing specific clauses from the trust agreement, shareholder contracts, and the tenancy deed governing the family home. These notices explicitly stated that Lisa held no ownership rights over Elliott Manufacturing or the house under the terms of the irrevocable trust and the buy-sell agreements. The language was firm but professional, emphasizing that any unauthorized interference or attempted asset transfers would not only be legally invalid, but could also expose her to serious consequences, including court injunctions and potential financial penalties. Serving these notices was a calculated move. It was the official communication that marked the boundary between informal family discussion and formal legal dispute. I insisted on strict adherence to protocol. Every notice was sent via certified mail with return receipt requested, and copies were simultaneously delivered through Jacob's office to ensure receipt was documented. This level of procedural discipline was essential to build an evidentiary record that could be referenced if the matter escalated to litigation. I was determined that no ambiguity or hearsay could be used to undermine our position. Alongside these notices, Jacob filed a formal petition with the probate court to enforce the terms of the family trust and invoke the buy-sell agreements attached to the house deed. This petition sought judicial confirmation of the trust's authority over the business and the property, and it requested the court to issue an order preventing any unauthorized transfer or sale of the house without compliance with the right of first refusal clauses. The filing was comprehensive, supported by exhibits that included certified copies of the trust instrument, shareholder agreements, property deeds, and a detailed affidavit from me, laying out the operational control I maintained over the business and the legal frameworks guarding the assets. While Jacob took the lead on legal filings, I focused on operational continuity. I knew that any visible disruption could damage client confidence and invite further instability. To preempt this, I reached out discreetly to our key clients and suppliers, informing them of the situation in measured terms and reassuring them that Elliott Manufacturing's management and contractual obligations remained unchanged. I provided select clients with copies of relevant business licenses and confirmations of our operational authority, ensuring they understood that any claims purported by Lisa lacked legal merit and would not affect ongoing projects or deliveries. Maintaining these relationships was critical to prevent reputational damage during the dispute. Simultaneously, I recognized the need to safeguard my professional future. Although I was confident in our legal position, prolonged litigation could distract from my career and financial stability. To mitigate this risk, I accepted a preliminary offer for a senior management role at a competitor company. This position offered comparable responsibilities and a salary package that would protect my income stream should the legal battle extend longer than anticipated. This was a strategic contingency, ensuring that personal financial pressures would not compromise my resolve or professionalism during the dispute. Throughout this phase, Lisa remained publicly dismissive, her smirk intact in family gatherings and social circles. She continued to make casual statements, insinuating her entitlement to the house and business, seemingly unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the legal barricades we were constructing. Her public bravado was, however, a mask. Privately, the formal notices and Jacob's filings had clearly unsettled her. Our legal counsel confirmed that she had yet to retain any qualified attorney or respond substantively to the notices, leaving her position vulnerable. I remained vigilant, maintaining comprehensive logs of all communications with Lisa and her informal representatives. Every phone call, text, or email was documented and saved with timestamps. This thorough record-keeping was not only a safeguard, but also a strategic asset should the need arise to prove patterns of interference or bad faith conduct. I instructed Jacob to ensure that all future exchanges with Lisa would be routed exclusively through legal counsel to avoid miscommunication or inadvertent concessions. While the legal machinery was now firmly in motion, I continued to monitor the situation closely, reviewing financial reports and operational updates daily. My focus was to ensure that the business remained insulated from the inheritance dispute's turbulence. I convened additional internal meetings with senior management to reaffirm roles and responsibilities, emphasizing the importance of a united front and adherence to contractual obligations. By instituting these multi-layered protective measures, formal legal notices, court petitions, client communications, and personal career safeguards, I positioned myself to withstand Lisa's ongoing challenges. The legal trap was set. The trust's irrevocable terms and contractual buy-sell clauses formed a nearly impenetrable barrier, and the formal notices served as a clear warning that unauthorized claims would trigger swift legal action. Meanwhile, my strategic preparation extended beyond the courtroom, ensuring operational stability and personal security. At this stage, the dispute was no longer a simple family quarrel. It had crystallized into a professional contest of legal frameworks, documentation, and strategic control. Lisa's disregard for the complex ownership structure and her lack of legal counsel put her at a distinct disadvantage. The meticulous formalities we enforced sent a message that entitlement alone would not prevail. The pressure was mounting invisibly but inexorably, setting the stage for the next phase, where legal enforcement actions would test the strength of her claims and resolve. Lisa's initial attempts to assert control over company assets quickly ran up against the legal barricades we had meticulously prepared. Within days of serving her with formal notices, she made moves to seize equipment and access sensitive operational systems, actions that Jacob and I anticipated. However, thanks to the court injunctions Jacob successfully secured, these efforts were immediately halted. The injunctions legally prohibited any unauthorized interference with the trust's assets, effectively freezing Lisa's ability to disrupt business operations or transfer property. From a professional standpoint, this was a critical containment measure. It prevented potential damage not only to the company's physical assets, but also to its reputation. The repercussions of these legal constraints on Lisa's public image became evident as word spread through our client network. Several long-term clients reached out with concerns after hearing rumors of internal conflict and disputed ownership. I responded promptly by distributing formal communications, carefully drafted letters and emails to key stakeholders, reassuring them that Elliott Manufacturing remained under stable, documented management. I included excerpts from the court injunction and highlighted the trust's governance protections. This proactive transparency was designed to counteract any erosion of confidence that could arise from Lisa's disruptive actions. It was essential that our clients understood the dispute was strictly a legal matter, with no impact on our service commitments or contractual obligations. Meanwhile, Lisa escalated her demands, insisting on immediate possession of the family house, as well as control over key company accounts. She sent multiple letters, none reviewed or tempered by legal counsel, claiming her rightful inheritance and threatening to initiate self-help measures if her demands were not met. These letters, which I preserved meticulously, became part of our dossier, illustrating her disregard for legal process and fiduciary responsibility. Jacob advised that such overt threats could be construed as bad faith conduct and might strengthen our position in seeking further court sanctions. As Lisa's personal financial woes worsened, creditor pressure intensified. Her outstanding debt of $118,000, much of it unsecured, began to draw the attention of collection agencies and potential legal judgments. This external financial stress added a layer of urgency to her claims, but also made her position more precarious. I noted that her creditors' interest in the estate assets risked complicating the legal landscape further, potentially inviting third-party claims or forced asset liquidation, circumstances my father's trust was specifically designed to prevent. Regulatory authorities also started reviewing her conduct. Complaints filed by our legal team, combined with evidence of unauthorized asset interference, prompted investigations into potential violations of corporate governance and estate law. These regulatory reviews introduced another dimension of professional risk for Lisa, potentially exposing her to fines or other penalties. I remained apprised of these developments through Jacob's updates, carefully balancing the need for assertive action with the strategic option to negotiate if her stance softened. Throughout this period, Lisa's communications shifted in tone. She began reaching out directly to me, requesting informal mediation sessions and suggesting family discussions to resolve the dispute quietly. I maintained professional boundaries, responding only through Jacob and declining to engage in private negotiations. My response was consistent and measured. All communications should be routed through legal counsel to ensure clarity and protect our position. This firm posture sent a clear message that I was serious about upholding the legal and fiduciary frameworks and would not be drawn into informal compromises that might undermine the documented agreements. The visible cracks in Lisa's confidence became apparent to those close to the situation. Privately, She confided to family members about mounting legal fees, creditor threats, and the growing professional isolation she faced. Meanwhile, the court injunctions effectively froze her ability to disrupt the company or claim the house, rendering her threats largely symbolic rather than actionable. From my perspective, these developments confirmed that our strategy to use legal mechanisms, first to contain her actions, then to apply pressure through formal channels, was working as intended. Internally, I ensured that the company's executive team remained fully briefed and aligned. We reinforced compliance with contractual obligations and prepared contingency plans in case litigation extended. Importantly, I maintained open lines of communication with key clients, suppliers, and partners, providing regular updates to reinforce stability and counteract any reputational damage stemming from the dispute. This comprehensive approach minimized operational risks and kept the company insulated from the inheritance conflict. Throughout, my documentation efforts intensified. Every unsolicited communication from Lisa, every legal notice, and every client inquiry was logged and archived with precise timestamps. This detailed record would serve as critical evidence should the dispute escalate to court hearings or regulatory proceedings. Maintaining a professional, systematic archive bolstered our position by demonstrating that I acted transparently, responsibly, and in accordance with all legal and fiduciary duties. Despite the mounting pressures, I remained focused on strategic patience. The injunctions and legal actions were not just defensive moves, they set the stage for the next phase of enforcement. Our position was firm, and while Lisa's challenges generated noise and tension, they did not translate into substantive control or ownership shifts. The house and business remained protected by the legal frameworks my father established, and the court's support reinforced their authority. Lisa's public dismissiveness increasingly appeared as facade rather than substance. Behind the scenes, the consequences of her actions, legal setbacks, creditor demands, regulatory scrutiny, were constraining her options more tightly with each passing day. I anticipated that these pressures would intensify, compelling her to reconsider her approach. For now, however, the situation remained professionally precarious, with the dispute evolving into a formal legal contest that would test the resilience of the trust's protections and the validity of her claims. In sum, the initial consequences of Lisa's attempts to seize assets reflected the effectiveness of a well-orchestrated legal and operational defense. The court injunctions stopped unauthorized asset transfers, client confidence was managed through transparent communication, and regulatory oversight began to curtail her interference. Professional discipline and methodical documentation ensured I maintained control of the company and estate assets, while positioning us advantageously for forthcoming legal challenges. The conflict was far from resolved, but the foundation for enforcing rightful ownership was solid and actively reinforced. The court hearing marked a critical juncture in this dispute, and I approached it with the same rigor and preparation that had guided me through every stage so far. Jacob Freeman and I had spent weeks assembling a comprehensive package of evidence, legal arguments, and affidavits to present before the judge. The goal was straightforward: to confirm the irrevocable nature of the family trust, enforce the right of first refusal clause on the house, and categorically deny Lisa's claims to both the business and the property. From the outset, our presentation highlighted the trust's irrevocable framework. We meticulously explained how the trust had been established years earlier, with clear stipulations that ownership of Elliott Manufacturing and all associated assets was vested solely in the trust, not in my father's personal estate. This distinction was pivotal. The trust's irrevocable status meant that its terms could not be amended or overridden after my father's death, and that all assets held within it were insulated from probate claims, including Lisa's. The judge carefully examined our submissions, which included certified copies of the trust instrument annotated with relevant clauses. We emphasized the fiduciary responsibilities that I, as the primary beneficiary and appointed operations manager, was entrusted with. To support this, we presented affidavits from senior executives confirming the continuity of management under my leadership and the absence of any authority granted to Lisa. These affidavits underscored that any attempt to transfer ownership or operational control to Lisa would be both unauthorized and legally invalid. Next, we addressed the house deed and the tenancy agreement that governed its ownership. The right of first refusal clause was a central component. We demonstrated how this contractual provision gave trust beneficiaries, including myself, priority to purchase the property before any third-party sale could take place. Lisa's claim that she could simply take possession was contradicted by this binding agreement. The judge reviewed the deed and tenancy documents, noting the enforceability of the clause and the protections it afforded to the beneficiaries. Importantly, we included a detailed timeline correlating Lisa's attempts to assert control with the legal requirements outlined in the trust and shareholder documents. We showed that she had neither sought nor received any formal approval from the trust or corporate board, rendering her actions legally void. Jacob underscored that such unauthorized attempts constituted breaches of fiduciary duty and violations of corporate governance. When the judge opened the floor to Lisa's counsel, the weaknesses in her case became apparent. She lacked substantive legal representation and was unable to refute the weight of our documentation. Her arguments relied largely on emotional appeals and assumptions about inheritance, rather than the binding legal frameworks we presented. The court's response was measured but firm, underscoring that the trust's irrevocable terms and buy-sell agreements controlled asset disposition. The judge ruled unequivocally in favor of enforcing the trust's provisions, explicitly denying Lisa's claims to the business and the house. He cited the detailed evidence outlining ownership structures, fiduciary roles, and contractual safeguards. The ruling confirmed that the business was legally owned by the trust, with me as the designated beneficiary and manager, and that the house's right of first refusal clause blocked any unilateral transfer. This order effectively nullified Lisa's informal assertions of ownership. Moreover, the court charged Lisa with contempt for her attempts to seize company assets without authorization. This was a significant professional rebuke, signaling that her actions had crossed legal boundaries. The ruling included sanctions aimed at deterring further unauthorized interference. Jacob filed motions to recover damages and legal fees incurred due to her bad faith conduct, which the judge accepted as reasonable and necessary to uphold fiduciary integrity. Regulatory authorities were apprised of the court's findings and initiated administrative actions based on the contempt ruling and corporate governance violations. Lisa faced fines totaling $45,000 for her interference, further compounding her financial and legal difficulties. The judge's order also included a full injunction preventing her from initiating any further unauthorized claims or asset transfers. When Lisa's representatives submitted offers to settle the dispute on terms heavily favoring her, we declined calmly and professionally. I instructed Jacob to respond with a firm assertion that all future communications would proceed through legal channels and that no informal settlements would be entertained without strict adherence to legal standards. Our position was clear. The trust's terms and court orders would not be compromised by expedient negotiations. Throughout the hearing, I maintained a composed demeanor, focusing on the facts, evidence, and legal principles rather than emotions or provocations. This approach reinforced the professionalism underpinning our case. The judge's ruling was a validation of our strategy. Methodical preparation, comprehensive documentation, and adherence to fiduciary duty had dismantled Lisa's uninformed and legally untenable claims. That day underscored the power of disciplined legal stewardship in family business disputes. The court's enforcement of the irrevocable trust and the right of first refusal clause did not just protect the assets, it reaffirmed the integrity of the governance structures my father had put in place. While Lisa's challenge was forceful, it lacked the legal foundation required to prevail. The professional frameworks won the day, setting a precedent that entitlement must always be measured against documented rights and obligations. As I left the courtroom, the stakes had not lessened, but my position was strengthened. The ruling was a significant legal victory, yet the broader dispute still required careful management. The trust's protections were upheld, but the enforcement of sanctions and the ongoing repercussions for Lisa's conduct meant that the conflict would persist in other forms. Nonetheless, the court's decision provided a critical legal foundation for the next phase. It empowered us to pursue further enforcement actions, recover related costs, and continue safeguarding the business and estate assets. Lisa's professional and legal standing had been firmly challenged, and the judicial system had made clear the consequences of disregarding established legal frameworks. This hearing was not the conclusion, but a crucial milestone in a systematic process grounded in law, documentation, and strategic control. It demonstrated that in complex inheritance matters, clarity of governance and professional discipline are paramount. The foundation was laid for forthcoming steps to secure the estate and business fully, and I remained committed to navigating these challenges with the same measured professionalism that had brought us this far. Lisa's professional standing began unraveling swiftly and with a precision that mirrored the legal strategy Jacob and I had painstakingly implemented. The moment the court injunctions were issued, halting her unauthorized access to company assets and the family home, the ripple effects extended far beyond the immediate dispute over the estate. Creditors, who had previously been patient or unaware of the full scope of Lisa's financial troubles, quickly pivoted to more aggressive collection actions. I monitored these developments closely through publicly available court records and credit monitoring services, which confirmed that foreclosure proceedings on her personal property had been initiated. This was a significant escalation. Foreclosure not only threatened her housing security, but broadcasted her financial instability to the local business community and family network. The negative impact on her creditworthiness was compounded by looming bankruptcy filings. Although she had not yet formally declared bankruptcy, multiple preparatory steps, such as consultations with insolvency attorneys and informal negotiations with creditors, were documented through intercepted correspondence and subsequent legal filings. These filings revealed a precarious financial position that severely undermined her leverage in the inheritance dispute. From a professional standpoint, Lisa's deteriorating financial status had a direct correlation to her capacity to sustain legal challenges. Litigation, especially in contested inheritance matters, demands substantial financial resources for attorney fees, court costs, and ancillary expenses. Her inability to secure competent legal counsel placed her at a distinct tactical disadvantage. This vulnerability was a critical factor in shaping our approach. Rather than seeking immediate settlement, we anticipated that financial strain would constrain her options and potentially encourage concessions under court supervision. Simultaneously, the ongoing regulatory scrutiny initiated by the estate lawyer's complaints began to bear down on Lisa. State and local authorities opened investigations into her conduct regarding interference with corporate governance and unauthorized attempts to seize trust assets. I stayed regularly informed through Jacob's updates and public regulatory filings. These inquiries culminated in the imposition of administrative fines totaling $45,000, a sum substantial enough to further aggravate her financial pressures. Moreover, the regulatory findings were documented in official reports that were accessible to professional associations and credit agencies, thereby eroding her standing in the local business environment. The confluence of legal sanctions, creditor actions, and regulatory penalties created a cumulative effect that materially diminished Lisa's credibility, not only as a family member contesting inheritance, but as a professional actor within the community. I observed that her communications shifted in tone and frequency. She began reaching out directly to me, with requests for mediation and informal resolutions, signaling a move away from public posturing toward private negotiation. Despite this, I maintained professional boundaries, responding exclusively through Jacob and emphasizing the necessity of legal protocol. This posture ensured that any engagement was documented and that our strategic position remained intact. The visible erosion of her confidence was subtle but unmistakable. I gathered intelligence from mutual acquaintances and family members who reported her growing isolation and increasing difficulty in managing creditor demands. Her social and professional networks seemed to retract, wary of association with ongoing legal controversies and financial instability. This isolation further constrained her ability to mount a credible challenge or rally support within the family or business community. Meanwhile, the family business stabilized under my stewardship. I convened regular executive meetings to reinforce operational discipline and ensure all departments adhered strictly to established contracts and compliance mandates. Client retention remained robust, in part due to proactive communications that reaffirmed Elliott Manufacturing's stability and continuity. Industry observers noted the professionalism with which the company handled the dispute, and I took care to cultivate these perceptions through measured public statements and carefully managed client interactions. From a personal perspective, I maintained scrupulous records of all communications with Lisa. Every phone call, email, or message was logged with timestamps and securely archived. These records proved vital in demonstrating a pattern of interference on her part and supported motions for sanctions and cost recovery filed by Jacob. By insisting on formal channels and rejecting informal negotiations, I preserved the integrity of our legal position and avoided the pitfalls of unrecorded concessions or misunderstandings. As Lisa's legal and financial difficulties compounded, the pressure mounted toward a critical juncture. The combination of foreclosure proceedings, bankruptcy threats, regulatory penalties, and damaged reputation increasingly boxed her into a corner. Yet, despite these mounting pressures, the situation remained professionally precarious. Lisa had not yet capitulated, and the potential for further complications, such as appeals, counterclaims, or family disputes, remained real. In reflection, this phase of the dispute underscored the power of a methodical, law-driven strategy. My adherence to documented evidence, legal procedure, and operational transparency steadily wore down Lisa's untenable posture without resorting to confrontation or emotional appeals. The incremental professional destruction she experienced was not collateral damage but a foreseeable consequence of her uninformed and reckless attempts to claim assets protected by irrevocable trust and contractual safeguards. While the legal battle was far from over, the erosion of Lisa's financial and professional standing marked a turning point. It reinforced the necessity of patience, discipline, and strategic leverage in complex inheritance disputes. The situation remained dynamic, the outcome unresolved, but the trajectory favored the disciplined application of law and process over entitlement and impulsivity. The next phases would require continued vigilance and readiness to enforce the trust's protections in court and regulatory forums, ensuring the family legacy and business I had stewarded for 15 years remained secure. The court's ruling was a pivotal moment in this ongoing dispute, delivering a decisive affirmation of the legal structures my father had meticulously put in place to protect Elliott Manufacturing and the family home. The judge awarded me full control of the company, explicitly recognizing the irrevocable family trust as the rightful owner of all business assets. This confirmation was not merely symbolic. It legally empowered me to manage and operate Elliott Manufacturing without interference, reinforcing my role as the primary beneficiary and appointed operations director. Alongside this, the court awarded me $118,000 in legal fees, acknowledging the substantial expenses incurred defending the trust's integrity against Lisa's baseless claims. This judgment served not only as financial restitution, but as a formal rebuke of Lisa's actions, marking her conduct as not only unjustified, but costly to the estate. The explicit inclusion of legal fee recovery underscored the court's recognition of the merit and reasonableness of my position, and it established a financial deterrent against any future frivolous challenges. Importantly, the ruling also upheld my rights to the house buyout option, as delineated in the tenancy agreement's right of first refusal clause. This meant that before any transfer of the property could proceed, I retained the contractual priority to purchase Lisa's share, effectively blocking her from unilaterally disposing of the family home. This judicial enforcement of the property clause reinforced the layered protections my father had embedded into the estate planning, safeguarding family assets from impulsive or unauthorized transfers. On the other hand, Lisa faced significant consequences stemming from the court's judgment. She was slapped with regulatory sanctions for violating fiduciary duties and interfering with corporate governance. These penalties amounted to fines totaling $45,000 and included formal censure by state business oversight agencies. Such sanctions not only intensified her financial burdens, but also damaged her professional standing within the local business community. Being blacklisted by prominent industry associations further isolated her, effectively barring her from participating in certain business networks and damaging her credibility as a professional. The enforcement of the trust's governance model drew positive attention in industry publications and among corporate legal circles. Several trade journals featured analyses of the case, highlighting the family trust as a textbook example of robust asset protection and succession planning. The case was cited in seminars and professional forums as a cautionary tale illustrating how meticulous documentation and well-structured corporate governance can decisively counteract unfounded inheritance claims. This public recognition of the trust's strength served as a vindication of the strategic planning my father and I had invested in over the years. Following the court's decision, I secured an accelerated vesting of my stock options by court order. This acceleration not only increased my equity stake more rapidly, but also enhanced my influence over the company's strategic direction. This legal affirmation of my ownership rights fortified my position as the rightful steward of the business and provided leverage in future negotiations or expansions. Moreover, amid the ongoing dispute, I negotiated a 15% salary increase in my new role at a competing firm. This raise reflected both my industry reputation, bolstered by the recent legal victory, and the value of my operational expertise. The new position offered not only financial stability, but also a platform to expand my professional influence beyond the family business. It was a strategic career move that ensured my professional resilience, irrespective of the estate's protracted legal entanglements. Throughout this period, professional peers and colleagues in my network expressed respect for the strategic rigor and legal precision demonstrated during the dispute. Many regarded the case as a landmark example of how detailed documentation, transparency, and calm professionalism could overcome familial entitlement and preserve business continuity. Their recognition reaffirmed my commitment to methodical stewardship and underscored the importance of maintaining rigorous corporate governance even in emotionally charged scenarios. Despite the court's clear rulings and the mounting consequences for Lisa, I remained focused on the ongoing management and strategic positioning of Elliott Manufacturing. The legal victory was a major milestone, but it was also a foundation for further actions to solidify the trust's control and prevent any future disruptions. I continued working closely with legal counsel to monitor compliance, anticipate potential challenges, and ensure that the company's operations advanced without interruption. This phase of the dispute highlighted the critical interplay between legal frameworks and professional diligence in resolving complex inheritance conflicts. The court's affirmation of the trust's irrevocable terms and the enforceability of contractual buy-sell agreements validated the strategic approach I had championed from the start, that thorough documentation and adherence to fiduciary responsibilities are paramount in safeguarding family legacies. Though Lisa's legal and financial standing had been severely damaged, the saga was not finalized. The case's broader implications for family business succession and estate planning remained a subject of professional discourse. For my part, the experience reinforced my belief that in the face of betrayal and entitlement, the measured application of law and strategic professionalism, not confrontation, must prevail. The judgment granted me not only legal authority and financial compensation, but also the professional validation to carry forward my father's legacy under the protection of sound governance and unassailable documentation. Today, I lead a successful consulting firm specializing in manufacturing operations and family business governance, leveraging the extensive industry expertise I accumulated over my 15 years managing Elliott Manufacturing. My equity stake in this new venture stands at 25%, a substantial ownership position that reflects both my operational experience and strategic acumen. With this role, I earn a salary approximately 20% higher than what I received previously, an acknowledgement by my new partners of the value I bring both in business insight and in navigating complex organizational dynamics. Securing this position was a deliberate professional move, one that reinforced my financial stability and broadened my influence beyond the family enterprise. While Elliott Manufacturing remains central to my professional identity, diversifying through this consulting firm allows me to apply lessons learned from the inheritance dispute and business stewardship to a wider range of clients facing similar challenges. It's both an evolution and a continuation of my career trajectory, affirming that strategic patience and disciplined documentation can yield long-term career growth even amidst personal conflict. Regarding the family home, the judicially enforced buyout option enabled me to purchase Lisa's share under terms favorable to the trust and aligned with market valuations governed by the clause in the tenancy agreement. This transaction was executed with full transparency and legal oversight, ensuring compliance with all contractual requirements. Owning the house outright has strengthened my financial base considerably and provided a stable personal foundation from which to build future endeavors. The property itself now stands as not just a family legacy in bricks and mortar, but a symbol of methodical, principled stewardship overcoming entitlement. Reflecting on the entire ordeal, I recognize that the outcome was not merely the product of legal maneuvers or courtroom victories. The real power lay in my commitment to rigorous documentation, deep understanding of complex contracts, and measured strategic patience in the face of provocation. At no point did I allow emotions to override professionalism. Instead, I treated the dispute as a matter of documented rights and fiduciary duties, always prioritizing the integrity of processes over personal vendettas. This experience affirmed a fundamental truth about family business succession, that emotional ties and assumptions of entitlement must be balanced against established legal frameworks and transparent governance. My father's foresight in establishing an irrevocable trust with detailed shareholder and tenancy agreements was the cornerstone of protecting our legacy. Equally important was my role in maintaining precise operational records and financial documentation, which served as irrefutable evidence in legal proceedings. Throughout the conflict, I maintained calm professionalism and a systematic approach, resisting the temptation to engage in emotional confrontations or informal negotiations. This discipline preserved my credibility, not only within the family but also in the broader business community. It reaffirmed that in professional disputes, especially those entangled with family dynamics, success hinges on adherence to process, clarity of evidence, and strategic foresight. Looking forward, I am confident that the legacy my father built, and that I have dutifully preserved, is secure. Elliott Manufacturing continues to operate under stable management, benefiting from the protections the trust provides and the governance structures we have reinforced. My consulting work now extends these principles outward, helping other family firms navigate similarly complex challenges with the same professionalism and rigor. This journey has transformed what began as a painful family betrayal into an opportunity for growth and reaffirmation of values. It demonstrated that competence, calm, and meticulous preparation can turn adversity into advantage, that legal frameworks are indispensable tools in protecting legacy, and that measured strategic patience ultimately prevails over impulsive entitlement. In sum, I have not only safeguarded my inheritance, but also elevated my professional standing and built a platform for future success. The house and business, once points of contention, are now secured assets emblematic of disciplined stewardship. The lessons learned continue to inform my work, guiding me to advise others with the conviction that justice and professionalism go hand in hand. The road ahead is open, built on the foundation of law, documentation, and unwavering commitment to principled leadership.